Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about Han. Is Han a problem? Yes or no? And if so, what to do about it? Something I've realized, and I was a little bit surprised, a lot of people are advocating in favor of a Han nerf to some degree. And today I just really wanted to get into the details, the nitty gritty. I'm going to represent the arguments in favor of it. I'm going to represent the arguments against it, and then at the end I'm going to give my opinion about what I think we should do about it. And there's a kind of a two separate issue which we're going to break down. And the first issue is Han as a leader, and people have been saying that Han as a leader has a number of issues. He has a good stat for a leader that deploys on 5, because yes, technically he deploys on 6, but you can use his ability to get himself an extra resources, which allows him to deploy one turn earlier. So 4, 6, or 5 is very good stats. There's a caveat to this. Obviously, you cannot deploy right away. You're often going to have to spend an action to get in extra resources, which obviously is a downside. But overall, it behaves mostly as a 4, 6, 4, 5, which is a pretty good stat line in today's standard. The second thing, and really the main thing about Han as a leader, the first Han, Audacious Smuggler, is that he has simply the strongest leader ability in the game, and that has been true since the very beginning of Star Wars Unlimited. I was one of the first person who really advocated heavily in favor of this leader, saying that this leader was the leader that has among the leaders that we have in the game, is the leader that has the most potential. Even more so than Boba. I mean, Boba was just the overall strongest leader, but Han is the one that has the highest potential. And we're seeing his potential coming through now as people are kind of understanding their leader better and building better decks, and as we are also having more cards. He has the strongest leader's ability in the game simply because trading tempo for card advantage is a very good thing to do in Star Wars Unlimited. Star Wars Unlimited is a game where we draw 2 cards per turn, meaning that it's quite difficult to run out of card in this game. And unless you're really playing a dedicated deck that really has very low cost card, really you don't need much of card draws in Star Wars Limited. So the card advantage is not really that valuable of a resource most of the time, as opposed to other games like Magic the Gathering or even Lorcana. However, being able to get extra resources is extremely valuable, and it's extremely valuable as it allows you to deploy bigger threats and also allows you to deploy your leader faster. So all those factors combined makes Han Solo extremely powerful, because it not only allows you to play cards that are bigger than what they should be early on in the game, but they also allow you to smooth out your curve, because suddenly you can play 3 drops, you can play them on turn 1, or you can play them on turn 2, depending on the situation. And this flexibility is very, very nice. We see this also with the other Han, the Young Han, which also has this flexibility of being able to play his 3 drops as 2 drops, and this allows you that you don't have to play as many 2 drops anymore. Same for 5 drops. The 5 drops can be played as 4 drops. The 6 drops can be played as 5 drops. And this gives you like a smoother curve than any other game deck in the game, because you get that flexibility. And every single turn in the game, you get more options, because you can either play, let's say you can either play like a 3 drops, or you can play a 4 drops by getting an extra resources. And this is what makes Han so difficult to play, but also what makes Han so powerful, because it has just so many options that makes him so incredibly flexible. And the flexibility in the hand of a good player that has a good understanding of the game is an extremely deadly weapon. And then the last really element that it makes Han as a leader very, very powerful is the fact that he has very, very strong synergies. I think one of the most obvious example, obviously, is the synergy between Han and the DJ. So the ability to basically get yourself an extra resources, and then be able to deploy the DJ using Smuggle, and then being able to defeat the resource that you stole, meaning that even if DJ gets killed, you don't give a resource back. And that synergy is very, very powerful. But not only that synergy, is simply just also like how powerful it is, combined with like a resupply, being able to go resupplies on turn 2, and then you go get an extra resources, get 5, deploy Han, to get 6, deploy Han, attack with Han, and then play a 7 drops on turn 3, which is something that no other deck can do at the moment. So there's a lot of synergies with Han that are very powerful, and I expect this to only get better or worse depending on how you look at it as the game is going to expand and is going to get more cards. So now let's talk a little bit more kind of like I'm going to run down and ask the same question that I've asked when I made my video about Boba back in the days, where I was really trying to go bit by bit into what are the arguments that would make you want to nerf or ban a leader. And I'm going to be asking the same questions but for Han, and those questions are going to be, so first, before we do this, I just wanted to show you kind of like the percentage of the share percentage, the reason that make people kind of being very worried about how powerful Han in the current meta is. And these are the numbers of the PQ winners. And as you can see, we got a 27% if we're talking specifically about Han Yellow, which is extremely high. And then we got 38% per 96, so almost a 39% win percentage for Han as a leader in general. So not only is Han very powerful with Han Yellow, but Han is very powerful across multiple colors. We've seen Han Yellow doing great, Han Green doing very well too, Han Blue being a decent leader, and Han Red also being quite good. It's another element that is also kind of like a big deal. So one of the questions people ask me is, why it makes Han Yellow so much better now than it used to be in the previous set? And I think there's two elements of answers to that. The first element is that there's three elements of answers. The first element is that one of the worst matchups for Han was the Boba matchup. And now that Boba is gone, that makes a big difference for Han. That was the number one. The number two is the fact that Han, Yellow-White, has been in set 1 specifically one of the weakest color combination in the game. In set 2, it got a lot better thanks to the DJ Tech combo, and in set 3 it got even better. Actually, if you look at the strongest cards in set 3, which there are not that many of them, all of them are, like the vast majority of them are Yellow-White. Specifically, we got Plo Koon, you got Infizness, you got R2, you got so many strong cards in that particular combination for the specific, which now the Yellow-White color combination is not nearly as weak as it used to be. Now it is considered one of the strongest color combination in the game. And that obviously benefited Han because he's by far the best Yellow-White leader. So there's that element of answers. And then there's third element of answers that simply players are just better at the game. They just had more time practicing the leader, understanding how the leader plays out. And that really also there's more Han experts than they used to be. And that also really helps Han a lot. So all those elements together have contributed to making Han the monster that he now is. So those win percentage here are really scary, but you got to keep in mind that those are only taking into account the winners of PQs. If you look at the top 8 performances, which is a much bigger sample size, therefore a more accurate representation of the leaders' performances. I mean, obviously, it is significant that a leader is capable of winning because there's a couple more games that you need to win in order to get into a final to win a tournament, as opposed to just making it to top 8. But still, the making top 8 should be the main metric that we should be looking at while judging the power level of a leader, because it is a far bigger sample size. It's far more representative, in my opinion. So here you're seeing, if you look at the leaders and base and top 8, Han Yellow is only representing 17%, 0.23%, which in my opinion is definitely acceptable. I mean, ideally you would want to have every single deck below the 10% mark, but this is fairly, it's not terrible. It's not great, but it's not terrible in my opinion. And if you look at top 8, all leaders including, all colors included, then we jump at a 21.79%, which once again is definitely on the realm of acceptable in my opinion. So now that we have this out of the way, let's answer the different questions that we can kind of need to ask ourselves whether we think a leader should be banned or nerfed or not. And the number one question is, what percentage of meta does it occupy? So we already answered that question. We already answered that question. So this is important because obviously pretty much the big arguments against people wanting to have a leader being banned is obviously the lack of diversity of the meta, as it's harming the diversity of the metagame. Number one is, how long has this leader be on top? Ideally, you want the players to be able to answer a certain threat. Do you want to leave players time for them to counter a given archetype, a given leader? So if the leader becomes a little bit dominant, you don't want to nerf it right away. If you are a designer, you want to, as much as possible, let the players by themselves find the answer to that. So the longevity is very important whenever you look at a leader that needs to be nerfed or needs to be banned. You need to make sure that the players have no answer to it. Another argument is it fun to play against? This is another argument as well, is that sometimes leaders are not necessarily overpowered, but they're just simply just extremely not fun to play against universally. And on that specific account, there is definitely an argument to be made for a ban when it comes to the fun aspect of the game. We play games for fun at the end of the day, so if an archetype is not fun to play against, or even to play with, sometimes the arguments are, so it can be on both sides, that can be something that can harm the game in a different way than imbalance, but it's still harming the game in a very negative way. And then finally, is it oppressive? Is it oppressive? I mean, that, does it prevent other archetypes, other decks to exist? And to what extent is it oppressive? And then the final one is, does it create other issues that are maybe a little bit outside to those different questions? One of the issues, for example, is an archetype that takes too long, that makes game too long, which is something that could be happening. So an example for this would be like, let's say if we had a combo archetype that took like 10 minutes to win, but it would win within the same turn. Since in Star Wars Limited we have a rule that says that whenever you finish a game, you have to finish the end of the round. So if the players combo offs on the last round of the game and takes 10 minutes to do so, that can really have an issue on tournament organization, that kind of thing, which is something that did happen in the past in other games like Magic the Gathering. So let's answer all those questions. What meta percentage does it occupy? We already answered that question. It's about 20% of the meta if you take into account only the top 8. If you take into account the winners, then it's far higher than this, but I don't think this only taking into account the winners is a good way to look at. I think it's a far more skewed metrics. I think the far broader metric is going to give you a more representative idea. For how long has it been dominant? It's been dominant for about a month since it's been, I wouldn't say dominant is a wrong word, but just like being on top of the meta for about a month, which is a very short period of time in my opinion. So, in my opinion, so then the question is it fun to play against? In my opinion, yes. There's an exception to this, is like, and I will come into it later, as people find the resource stealing mechanics from DJ to be particularly frustrating to play against. But overall, the resource stealing does not happen that often, especially if you're playing against a good player. And overall, the Han deck is a fairly fair deck. It's a mid-range deck that plays normal Star Wars Limited. It plays units. It plays a few removal. It's trying to be aggressive. It's not an all-in aggressive deck. So it's a fairly fun deck to play against, in my opinion. Is it oppressive? In my opinion, it's not oppressive. I don't think there's any deck in the meta that cannot exist because Han is a thing. You could make the argument that a control is very difficult to play at the moment because Han is such an important thing, but I think the experience has proven that control still does occupy a pretty good portion of the meta. We're still having Bossk Blue being about like 5 to 6% of the meta at the moment, which is not that bad. And I honestly don't think people want hard control to be tier 1 in the meta. So you could even argue that Han Yellow is actually quite important to make sure that control does not get out of control in the meta, as people usually don't like those kind of archetypes to be the best decks in the game. So you could even make the argument that is the opposite of oppressive. It's actually doing a good job at keeping in check the super hard control decks. And then finally, the last question, does it create other issues? And that question, it's a no as well. So with all that taken into account, what do we think about whether Han Yellow should be banned or not, taking all this argument? And my question is a no. I think that for all the reasons here explained earlier, it is way too early to ban Han. So, and I'm going to give you a bit more explanation about this. So first of all, the first thing I want to say is that systematically banning or nerfing the best deck in a given meta is very disruptive for the players. Like, you do not want to do, in my opinion, banning or nerfing something should be a case of force majeure. It shouldn't be something that you should be pulling every single time. And because it's very disruptive, and it does not guarantee a better meta at all. It's something that I saw, for example, when I was playing Legends of Runeterra. the balance strategy of Legend of Runeterra, of Riot Games on this specific game was basically, okay, one is on top of the meta, let's nerf everything that is on top of the meta, even regardless of how dominant they are, how it just like to shake things up. And I didn't like that strategy because the meta that resulted into after those were not better than it was very disruptive, because people's favorite deck was being just nerfed all the time, in a fairly constant basis, and the meta that resulted into this mass amount of ban and nerf, they were very aggressive on nerfing and banning stuff. They were no ban, obviously, because it was a digital game, so they were just basically just adjusting the card. And the meta that resulted after this mass nerfing thing was never necessarily better than the previous one. It was just a different decks that were on top of the meta, but it was just not necessarily better. The meta was not more diverse after this wave of ban happening. And that was a little bit frustrating. So I'm not a big fan of this, and especially for a physical card game where banning and nerfing things are far more disruptive, because we're talking about people buying cards, and all those cards have like an individual value. Sorry. Anyway, my second big argument is that Han has not been on a top deck far too recently, and is not dominant enough to be worthy of being banned. Which is, come back to the previous argument I said, is that you want the players to adjust themselves to the meta. I think that as when you look at people's deck list, people have not adjusted yet. I don't know if it's something it's on purpose, but regardless of whether they think the deck is not powerful enough to be deserving to be hated against that much, or if people think are wrong and they should adjust but they haven't adjusted yet, whether one of those two things that you believe, regardless, people are clearly not taking Han that seriously, because you're not going to see scanning officers in every single green deck. Scanning officer is at best going to be in sideboard card. Only very few decks are actually going to play this in the main deck. Another card like Takedown is not systematically being played in blue decks. Even though Takedown is one of the best card against Han Yellow, in my opinion. Blue players play systematically 3 copies of Takedown in their deck. Like, I could go on a lot of other things, but there's a number of things that people aren't really doing to really hate on Han. And this is a sign that the deck is not really wrapping, the meta is not wrapping itself around Han. Han just happens to be, the meta is extremely diverse, and Han just happens to be the best deck among those things. It's not oppressing anything, and it's not really wrapping the meta around itself, as far as what I've observed. So this comes back to the argument I was saying about nerfing a leader has a lot of undesirable consequences, and it should only be used in case of force majeure. So for example, if you were banning a Han leader, people who own a Han showcase, their value of the showcase would go down. In my opinion, that's not the main argument to balancing a leader or not, but it is definitely something that you should be taking seriously, and you shouldn't be just constantly doing aggressive burn and nerfs. I don't think that's a good strategy. And the last argument is, like, in only a month, Set 4 will be released and will change everything. Set 4 is by far I can say this right away. I would be shocked if Set 4 is not the strongest set we've seen so far, since the first set came out. It is a far stronger set than Set 3, and it is significantly stronger than Set 2, and even from the card that we have, I can say that already, and we haven't seen everything. So for sure, the meta is going to be super different when Set 4 is going to hit. So this means that obviously it is way too early to nerf a leader. We don't even know if that leader is going to be a problem in the next set, which is only a month away. So that's way too early on that argument as well. So now the second question and a second argument that people have been kind of bringing to the table is the fact that DJ is too frustrating to play against. So this is an argument that people are putting out. It's not really an argument of whether Han is too strong or not, but rather the fact that DJ is just too frustrating to play against. So there's many ways they can basically kind of like nerf Han, and they don't have to nerf the leader immediately. They could nerf other cards that are basically only seeing plays in Han, and DJ is one of those cards. So the argument that people are making is like nerfing DJ would be at the same time making the deck a little bit less frustrating to play against, and it will also put the deck a little bit more in line. So this is kind of an argument. The previous argument was saying, oh, it would be balance-wise, Han needs to be balanced out, which is kind of on this argument, for me, it is clearly objectively wrong. I think from an objective standpoint, I think it would be wrong to nerf Han for balance reason. However, there's an emotional aspect to this, which is important because we're playing a card game, we're playing a game. So a game is an emotional experience more than anything else. It's an art form that we experience by playing. And therefore, if people are playing frustrated and are not having fun at playing the game because certain things exist, those needs to be addressed regardless or not whether those things are are balanced or not balanced. So the question that people are asking is DJ is too frustrating to play against? Does it need to be addressed? So let's kind of explore both arguments. So basically, the change that people would like to see about DJ, which is not a change to DJ, is actually a change to Han, but it is a change that currently is only affecting DJ, which is that whenever you're using Han's ability, what he would do is like you put the top card of your deck into play as a resource and ready it. At the start of the next action phase, defeat a resource you own and control. Instead, the current card only says defeat a resource you control, while the new version of that card would say you own and control. So that would be an errata. That means that you wouldn't be able to defeat the resource that you've stolen using DJ. Meaning that if there's no way to definitively destroy a resource from your opponent, you could actually kill a DJ to get back your resources regardless of what happened afterwards. This is the change that people are suggesting. So let's talk about the pro and the cons of that change. Let's talk about the pros first. So resource destruction across all trading card games have been relatively frustrating mechanics to play against. People don't like resource destruction, generally speaking, in TCGs. So I'll give my opinion later on about that. I personally don't have any problem with resource destruction as long as it's balanced and as long as it's interactive, which I think DJ has both of those things. But now let's talk about the pros. The other thing is like this errata would be relatively undisruptive because we're literally just adding 2 words to a card. It's not like we're changing the stat of a unit. We're just literally changing 2 words on the card. So that's not super disruptive compared to other things that we could do. I've heard, for example, people wanted to change the stat of Boba to make it like a 4/6 or like a 3/7 instead of a 4/7. But that's very disruptive because the big numbers that are written on the cards are literally the wrong numbers. So that's very disruptive. In this case, it's not very disruptive because it's only a couple of words that only matter for one specific interactions. So in this case, I think that it wouldn't be too disruptive for the casual players and also for the competitive players alike. And then the last argument in favor of it is like it would be a small and proportionate nerf to Han. At the end of the day, I don't think this would be a massive nerf to Han. I think there's only certain matchup in which DJ is actually pretty strong. And even in those matchups, basically against aggro, the ability for DJ to steal resources is fairly not unimportant. Like it's something that is way too slow to actually matter most of the time. However, against control, it's a far more powerful mechanic. But against control, if you know the matchup, you usually know how to kill the DJ before it gets to steal your resources. So it would steal your resources, but then you can kill it by the time the next turn happens, which these resources get destroyed. So it would be a small nerf. It wouldn't be like a massive nerf to Han by any stretch. And it would obviously be a bigger nerf to Han Yellow than it would be to the other because Han Yellow relies more on DJ than the other one because Han Yellow has the option to play it for 7, while the other really have to rely on the tech DJ combo, which is not that easy to put together. So it would be a small nerf it would be like a medium nerf to Han Yellow and it would be a very small nerf to the other Han versions. So it wouldn't be like a massive dick. So I think it would be proportionate. So now let's talk about the arguments against. So the first arguments against is like, my opinion is like if you know how to play against DJ and you have the appropriate tools in your deck, which you should have because it's the best deck in the game, so you should definitely prepare for it. And those tools are available in all colors. I don't know if you see my videos where I talk about how to counter Han, there are definitely options in every single color combinations to nerf to counter Han, and there's multiple options, not only one or two. So it's a very easy and interactive combo, because either if you're going DJ Tech, you require 2 cards, which obviously the first card has to come out first, give you an entire turn to react to it, and then the techs come out, and then you got another entire turn to answer the tech, and only after that do you actually get your resource stolen permanently. So that's something that it's very, very interactive. And even if the things comes out on 7, then it comes out so late in the game that it's usually not that big of a deal, unless you're playing control. And once again, you got at that stage of the game, you got tons of resources available, you got tons of cards, you got tons of time to prepare for that. So that all this makes it very easy to interact with. And if you're a good player and you have the right cards in your deck, the DJ combo is not really that big of a threat. Really, what makes this combo that powerful is not really the stealing of a resource by itself, it's rather the fact that those 2 cards are very good taken separately, and the fact that those cards have the option to combo together, but they don't have to. Those cards are really good cards just taken by themselves. And it's also a combo that doesn't require you to have the cards in your hand, which is very convenient. So it's a very convenient combo, but it's not really that powerful, if that makes sense, because it's very interactive. The second argument against that is that without the ability to permanently steal a resource, DJ would just become a boring 3-5 90% of the time. Something you realize that DJ actually doesn't see play outside of Han, because once you take out the fact that he can steal resources permanently, then he's basically just a 3-5. Even decks that play Heroism and Cunning, they have the possibility to go for the DJ Tech combo, but because they don't have the ability to steal that resource permanently, it's not worth it for them to run. So if you're going to be, basically once this combo is out of the way, DJ is basically only going to become a 3-5 for 3. So people are going to be playing it because of the 3-5 for 3 is a pretty good stat line, but the combo and the fact that you can steal a resource will become almost irrelevant most of the time. Because once again, against aggro, it's basically irrelevant because it's too slow, and against control, people will be able to kill your 3-5s no problem. And obviously, since the resource stealing is not permanent, it's really not that big of a deal. So in my opinion, it does make DJ a far more boring card to turn it into a 3-5, in my opinion. And that's, for me, is a big argument against nerfing the card, because then, yeah, DJ just becomes kind of like a boring 3-5s, in my opinion. The last argument against changing that is that the current meta is great. The current meta is one of the best meta we had in a long time. It's the best meta we had since set 1. And you gotta understand that the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is that you make a small change, and that small change kind of snowballs into big consequences. This is a small change, but a small change could have massive consequence. For example, what happened if DJ is one of the strongest cards against hard control decks? Do you really want hard control to become the best deck in the game? I don't think so. I don't think a change like this could really have disastrous consequence in terms of like making hard control like so much better. And I don't know if you want to be in a meta where hard control is the best deck. And I'm saying this as a Bosk Blue player. I'm actually literally playing Bosk Blue. I won Birmingham with Bosk Blue. So me, I don't have any problem with you guys nerfing DJ. But if you do, be careful, because this could have very bad consequences. Are you ready to risk it all just for that small adjustment to Han? Are you ready to risk the balance, the current balance of the meta, just for that small little change? And that's something you have to re-ask yourself, that question. So now let's talk about what is my personal opinion. So my personal opinion is like, from a balance standpoint, I don't think Han or DJ deserve a nerf or a ban or an errata. And I think even if they needed one, I think it's way too early to pull the trigger, because it's only been a month since it's starting to really being dominant. Sorry. And it's only being a month, and I think it's way too early to pull the trigger. My second argument is like, from an emotional standpoint, so this were like from a balance standpoint. Now from an emotional standpoint, I don't share the opinion that DJ is too frustrating to play against, because it's very interactive, and that's the main argument. But once again, this is kind of subjective, right? The emotional experience that you have against resource stealing is something that is subjective, so I can't really speak for everybody on that topic. If the majority of people think that he is frustrating, then I'll be fine with FFG doing an errata because, as I said, it's not very disruptive. It's a small change, so I don't think it would be a bad thing for the game, unless. But as I said earlier, be careful about unforeseen circumstances. Be careful about what it can provoke. So my opinion is that I'm not in favor of a Han nerf or Han ban, and I'm not in favor of a DJ ban or DJ errata. I'm not in favor of any of that stuff. But if it does happen, if the DJ does happen, the DJ thing happened because just the majority of people just can't take it anymore, then I'll be fine with that. I'll be like, okay, well, that's fine. Like I'm not gonna die on that hill. Like for me, it's not, it wouldn't be that big of a change, at least for Han. But I'm just a little bit afraid about the unforeseen consequences on the meta, as I said earlier. As once again, there's a delicate balance that happens and that happens naturally, and there's just the basic principle as don't fix something that's not broken. The meta is in great shape right now. Is it really worth the gamble to make this small change for something that people having a grip with and risking the entire balance of the meta? I don't think that is, especially so late into, like, we're going to be into set 4 soon. I think that's something that I would be against, even though I would not die on that hill. If it has happened, it's not really the end of the world. I think. I mean, hopefully it's not. So that's basically my opinion on this specific topic. Let me know if you have any additional thoughts on this. I try to make a fair argument for and to represent the argument of the opposite side well, but my opinion is that I'm not in favor of it. Let's see what set 4 brings to the table as well and how it shakes things out. Until then, you can watch if you're really having a hard time playing against Han Yellow. I'll invite you to check out my video. I'll put it in the description. My video to how to counter a Han, which I think is quite informative in my opinion. So thank you so much for following that video, and I'll see you next time.